The millionaire's daughter was falling ill without end, but the new nanny noticed something shocking. The mansion stood at the top of the hill like a monument to everything cold and unspoken. Its tall iron gates opened without sound, revealing a courtyard where the wind carried the scent of rain and forgotten memories. The marble floors gleamed, yet no one dared to look too closely, for beneath the reflection something heavy lingered. Inside, the echo of a child's cough cut through the silence. It wasn't loud, but it was constant, like a whisper that refused to die. Doctors had come and gone, specialists, healers, even men who promised miracles. None stayed longer than a day. None had answers. In one of the upper rooms, the little girl lay pale and fragile, her small hands clutching a stuffed bear whose fur had long lost its shine. Her eyes, once bright with curiosity, now stared at the ceiling with an emptiness that no medicine could explain. She was the only child of Adrien Lemaire, a man whose name meant power in every corner of the city. Yet in that moment, power meant nothing. Adrien sat beside her bed, his expensive watch catching the dim light as if mocking the slow passage of time. He whispered her name, Isabella, and she moved slightly but did not answer. The nurse standing near the window shook her head gently. "She's weak today," she said softly. "Her body isn't responding." He dismissed her with a nod, though his chest tightened. There were things money could buy: silence, obedience, illusion, but not the warmth of a daughter's laughter. That had been stolen from him months ago, and no one knew how to bring it back. When the new nanny arrived that morning, the rain was already falling. She stood at the entrance, her clothes damp, her eyes uncertain yet full of quiet determination. Her name was Clara, and though her resume said little, something about her presence felt different. She carried an air of compassion that didn't fit in that cold house. The butler led her upstairs, his steps echoing on the marble staircase. "You'll find the family complicated," he said, avoiding her gaze. "The master prefers privacy. The girl has been unwell." Clara nodded, holding her small bag tightly. She wasn't here for comfort. She was here because a child needed her. When she entered the room, the atmosphere changed. The air felt dense, filled with something invisible. Grief, perhaps, or guilt. Adrien turned his head, his expression unreadable. For a brief moment, their eyes met, hers warm, his exhausted. "You're the new nanny," he said quietly. "Yes, sir," she replied. "Clara Estevez." "Isabella doesn't talk much," he warned. "Don't force her. Just stay close." She approached the bed slowly. The girl's breathing was shallow, her lips slightly trembling. Clara knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. The child's skin felt cold, but beneath that chill, Clara sensed something. Not sickness, but fear. That night, the house was quieter than usual. The staff retreated early, the lights dimmed, and only the sound of rain tapping against the windows remained. Clara sat beside the child's bed, reading softly from a worn children's book. Her voice, gentle and rhythmic, filled the void. Suddenly, Isabella stirred. Her small voice broke the stillness. "The man comes when it's dark." Clara froze. "What man, sweetheart?" The girl turned her head slowly. "He touches the cups on the table and whispers." Before Clara could ask more, Isabella's eyes rolled back slightly and she drifted into uneasy sleep. Outside, thunder rumbled. Hours passed, and Clara's eyelids grew heavy. But just as she was about to rest, she heard it, the faint creak of a door opening down the hall. Her body tensed, footsteps slow, deliberate, almost hesitant. They stopped right outside Isabella's room. She rose silently, heart pounding. The handle moved just a little, and then stopped. After a moment, the steps retreated. She went to the door and peeked into the corridor. Empty, only the flicker of candlelight from the wall lanterns. Still, the air smelled faintly of medicine, sharp and chemical. The next morning, the mansion was alive again with routine. Servants moving, dishes clattering, orders whispered. Adrien appeared briefly at breakfast, his eyes bloodshot. Clara greeted him politely, but he barely nodded. He seemed lost in thought, distracted by invisible ghosts. As the day unfolded, Clara began noticing small inconsistencies. The glass of milk brought to Isabella's room always smelled different. The sheets were changed more often than necessary, and every time she tried to open the drawer beside the child's bed, the nurse appeared, insisting, "That's not for you." By the third day, Clara's instincts screamed that something was wrong. Isabella's condition worsened at night, yet her pulse steadied whenever Clara was alone with her. The doctor's visits seemed more like performances than consultations. That evening, Clara entered the kitchen quietly. The staff had gone to rest, leaving only a soft hum of the refrigerator. On the counter sat several small bottles, unlabeled, yet one bore faint traces of powder around the rim. She lifted it to her nose and winced. Bitter, metallic. Before she could investigate further, the cook entered abruptly. "Miss Clara, you shouldn't be here." Clara forced a smile. "I was only getting some water." The cook's eyes darted toward the bottles, then back to her. Best not touch things that aren't yours. That night she couldn't sleep. She kept replaying Isabella's words. The man comes when it's dark. Who was he? What was happening after midnight? At 2:14 a.m., the hallway clock chimed. Clara rose and stepped out of her room. The mansion seemed to breathe in shadows. As she approached Isabella's door, a faint light glowed beneath it, flickering like the reflection of a candle. Her heart raced. She turned the handle slowly. Inside, a tall figure stood beside the bed, his back facing her. He held a small glass, tilting it toward the sleeping child's lips. Clara gasped, and the man froze. When he turned around, her breath caught. It was Adrian. For a moment, neither spoke. The candlelight trembled between them. His face was pale, eyes hollow, yet full of something darker. Guilt. "She can't sleep," he whispered. "The medicine helps." Clara stepped closer, voice trembling. "That's not medicine, sir." He blinked, confused, almost dazed. "I'm helping her. I'm trying to help." The child moaned softly, and the sound shattered him. The glass slipped from his hand, spilling the liquid onto the sheets. Clara quickly lifted the cup away, her eyes filled with alarm. "Please, Mr. Lemaire," she said softly. "You're hurting her without knowing." But he didn't hear her. He sank into the chair, clutching his head. "She looks just like her mother. I see her face every night. I don't sleep. I only want the pain to stop." The room felt smaller, suffocating with grief and desperation. Clara wanted to speak, but words failed. She realized the sickness wasn't born of disease. It was born of despair. When dawn arrived, the storm had passed. The first light of morning touched the mansion's cold walls. Clara sat beside Isabella's bed, praying silently. She didn't know what awaited her, whether she'd be fired or thanked, believed or dismissed. But she knew she had seen the truth. The house that once stood as a symbol of wealth now hid a soul on the edge of collapse. And somewhere, within that fragile silence, a miracle was waiting to be born. The mansion learned to breathe again at night. Not the innocent breath of a house at rest, but the slow, watchful inhale of a creature that refuses sleep. Every hallway kept a memory, every step an echo, and in the room at the end of the corridor, the air held the shape of a small child's sigh. Clara did not close her eyes after what she had seen. Dawn came pale and apologetic, brushing the curtains with a weak hand. Isabella slept, exhausted. Adrian had left before the first bird dared to sing, his face erased by the dimness and the guilt he carried like an inheritance. When the butler knocked to deliver breakfast, his knuckles made 3 careful taps, as if even the door felt fragile. "Thank you," Clara whispered, accepting the tray. The tea was still steaming. The toast smelled faintly of butter and distance. She ate little and watched much. Isabella's breaths rose and fell with thin determination. A doll slept beside her, stitched smile, glass eyes, one arm mended with a clumsy care that looked like love. By mid-morning, a doctor arrived, a man in a dark jacket and a neutral soul. He asked questions whose answers he already knew, wrote prescriptions he'd written before, and nodded at symptoms he couldn't understand. He peered at Isabella's pupils, tapped her knees with a rubber hammer, and told Clara to keep the room quiet, the food bland, the hope moderate. When he left, he shook Adrian's hand and said, "Some children recover slowly. It's not unusual." But his eyes flicked to Clara, and in that quick, unguarded look she saw what he didn't say. This house carries something colder than illness. The day wore its weight like a coat that didn't fit. The nurse, stern, careful, loyal to silence, measured temperatures, logged numbers, moved vials. She seemed to carry a door inside her that no one could open. The cook avoided Clara, keeping her back turned, her hands invisible under the brim of a too-low hat. The butler polished silver as if polishing truth out of it. Every plate, every glass, every linen, gleaming, spotless, obedient, and somehow unclean. Clara changed Isabella's sheets and hummed a song that had stayed with her since childhood, something about a lantern and a road and winter passing. Isabella's lashes fluttered. Her small fingers found Clara's wrist and rested there, as if the pulse beneath the skin were a promise. "Do you have the dream again?" Clara asked softly. Isabella nodded without opening her eyes. The one with the floor that moves. What floor? The black floor with squares. It smells like lemon and metal. She paused. When I wake up, he's gone. Clara stroked her hair. The black and white marble floor. The corridor outside. Lemon polish. Metal. The house itself was speaking. Does the dream scare you? Only the whisper, Isabella said. It's close to my ear, like a secret trying to hide. Clara looked toward the hallway. The whisper didn't live in dreams. It walked. At noon, the sky forgot its color and fell into rain again. The windows gathered beads of water like tired eyes. Clara sat by the window briefly while Isabella napped, letting her gaze climb past the manicured hedges to the gates, to the city beyond, to the life she used to inhabit where worries had ordinary names. A siren rose somewhere far away, thinned by distance, swallowed by wealth. She brewed chamomile and pretended it could steady a shaking world. In the cup's faint halo of steam, she saw her mother's hands teaching her to trust what she felt when her eyes could not see. Truth is patient, her mother would say. It knocks until a door opens. At 3, the nurse brought a new set of bottles. Supplements, she announced, clinical and coated in professionalism. Clara read the labels. The handwriting bent like a reed in wind, inscrutable. I'll take it from here, the nurse added. You must rest, Miss Esteves. I will, Clara lied, gently positioning herself between the bottles and the bed. The nurse's smile had edges. When she left, the room exhaled, but not in relief, more like resignation. Clara slipped the bottles into her apron pocket, then replaced them with identical ones she'd hidden earlier. Boiled water, nothing more. The small deception felt like standing on glass. If she was wrong, she would be fired. If she was right, she dared not finish the thought. She simply watched. She waited. By evening, Isabella's color held. Not improved, not worse. Merely held, like a candle cupped by 2 hands in wind. Clara recorded the hours on a small notepad. Time, breathing, heartbeat against wrist, the shadow's length on the floor, evidence against the night. Dinner happened somewhere far away in the house. Cutlery tapped in another realm. Laughter did not live here. Adrian did not reappear. Clara wondered if he was hiding in his office, drowning in papers because they spoke a language that did not judge. When night finally came, it came like memory. The corridor lanterns burned low. The marble cooled. The rain softened to a hush, as if listening too. Clara dimmed Isabella's lamp and left only a sliver of amber, a gentle seam of light at the edge of dark. She sat in the chair, shoes off, spine straight. She let her breathing slow until it matched the child's. She closed her eyes without sleeping, the way one prays with the body instead of words. Somewhere after midnight, the house stirred. A soft, deliberate shift. The weight of a door eased open, cushioned by a hand that knew exactly which angle spared a squeak. Clara's eyes opened to the night the way a swimmer breaks the surface. The footsteps came, not hurried, not bold, careful, familiar. They stopped by the threshold. The handle moved with a sad little click. Clara didn't stand. She let the door open and the whispering hallway enter the room as a silhouette. A man holding a small glass, the light from the corridor scalloping his shoulders, a face divided by shadow. Mr. Lemaire, she said, her voice calm water. The doctor asked us to keep to the schedule. He froze. The glass trembled. The shadow wavered on the wall and then gathered itself again. She can't sleep without it, he murmured, like someone confessing to the dark. Last night she slept. You saw. I saw her survive the night, Clara answered. That's not the same as sleeping. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was packed with the furniture of a broken heart, a widower's unspent tenderness, a father's fear, the conviction that doing something must be better than watching helplessly. Adrian's outline shrank, and in it she saw not power, but a man undone. Please, he said, not to her, to the room, to whatever judge lived in his mind. Just a sip. She rests. I rest. Tomorrow I can think. Clara stood slowly. Will you let me show you something first? He did not answer, but he didn't move toward the bed. That was almost permission. She retrieved a tiny notebook from her pocket and offered it without stepping too close. I've kept notes since I arrived. Times, breath, small changes. Tonight I replaced the contents of the bottles with water. She felt the risk scratch her throat as she said it. If the effect were truly medicinal, we would have seen it. Isabella held steady because you didn't give her anything last night after you left. Her body rested because it wasn't fighting. Adrian's head lifted and the darkness made it hard to read his expression. You did what? I chose not to wait, she said simply. I chose to listen to the house instead of the labels, and the house says she worsens only when the night is tampered with. He stepped forward. The glass clicked against his ring. Anger flickered and then died like a match refused by wind. Are you accusing me? I'm asking you to stop, she said. Not because you're cruel, because you're drowning. He sagged then, all the fight sinking from his shoulders. He put the glass on the dresser with care as if it were something dangerous that could shatter the night. His hand stayed there for a long moment, splayed on the wood like a penitent's palm. I hear my wife in the hallway, he said quietly. Every night. I hear the way she coughed at the end, the way the nurses said it's only a matter of time, and I told them time belonged to me. It didn't. He turned his face slightly, enough for the light to catch one eye. I keep thinking, if I do, then I'm not failing. If I stop, I lose her too. Clara's voice softened. Sometimes stopping is the only thing left to do with love. From the bed, a small sound. Isabella turning. The covers rustled like leaves. Adrian glanced at his daughter and the sound broke him open. He pressed his lips together and nodded once, the smallest surrender. What do you need from me? He asked. Sit, Clara said. Sit here and breathe. Let her hear you breathing. Let her know her father is alive beside her, not the ghost that walks the corridor with a glass. He obeyed. He sat. He did the hardest thing a man like him could do. Nothing. For the first time since she arrived, the room changed its posture. The ceiling seemed lower, kinder. The lamp's weak circle of light felt warmer. Adrian leaned forward, elbows on knees, eyes fixed on the small rise and fall beneath the blankets. He was a man relearning how to occupy a chair without a task. Clara moved to the door. Carefully, she eased it until only a finger of darkness remained between wood and frame. The house pressed its ear to the gap and listened back. In that little seam, the night felt watched. Minutes spilled into an hour. The rain stopped. The mansion's enormous silence became almost gentle, like a tired animal that had decided not to bite. When Isabella's breathing deepened, Adrian's shoulders softened. A memory passed across his face, something tender, domestic, ordinary, like tying a ribbon, peeling an orange, carrying small shoes in one hand. I don't know how to pray, he said suddenly, as if surprised by his own voice. Not anymore. You're already doing it, Clara answered. Prayer is sometimes just staying. He looked at her then, not past her, not through her, but at her, and in that gaze she saw the edges of endurance. You speak as if you've lost someone. Yes, she said, but not to death, to fear. It steals just as much. They sat like that until the window washed itself in pre-dawn gray. The glass on the dresser stood unclaimed, its surface collecting the night's quiet. When the first dove muttered in the garden, Isabella stirred, not in distress but in the ordinary way of children who sense morning before clocks do. She opened her eyes a fraction and found her father. There it was, the tiniest relief, like a muscle unclenching. Papa, she whispered. Adrian's breath hitched. I'm here, he said. 2 words, and they remade the room. Clara withdrew a step, letting the moment draw its own outline. She felt the floor under her feet, the weight of her body, the steadiness of her own pulse. Her mother's voice returned, not a memory now, but a murmur braided into the room. Truth is patient. It knocks until a door opens. Someone tapped softly on the door. The nurse, punctual as always, carrying the morning's tray. Her expression was composed. A painting hung a little too straight. How was the night? She asked. Quiet, Clara said. Did she receive her doses? No. Clara's voice didn't harden, it simply refused to bend. She received her father. The nurse's eyes cooled. She looked from Clara to the untouched glass and then to Adrian, who sat by the bed with a posture that made it clear he had chosen a side he didn't know he was allowed to choose. A small calculation took place behind the nurse's face, then she inclined her head almost imperceptibly. Very well, she said. We'll reassess with the doctor. When she left, the hallway felt less dangerous, as if a set of footsteps had learned it was possible to retreat. Adrian stood and rubbed his eyes. The fatigue was immense, but it had changed color. It no longer looked like punishment, it looked like the price of staying. I have meetings, he said automatically, the old life script trying to stage a comeback. He looked at his daughter again, and let the script fall. They can wait. Clara nodded. May I ask for one more thing? Yes. Let me move the chair to the door tonight. Let me keep it open by an inch. Let the house learn a new habit. She smiled faintly. And if the whisper returns, we want it to see us listening. Adrian exhaled, a long, human sound. Do whatever you need. He left at mid-morning to change, to call the doctor, to cancel whatever men like him do when they decide to be fathers for a day. Clara fed Isabella a simple breakfast. Toast, soft fruit, water warmed slightly. The girl ate in small bites, as if reacquainting herself with the idea that food could be kind. In the early afternoon, Clara took the bottles from her pocket and, in the empty laundry room, poured their contents into a porcelain basin. The liquid spread like a quiet accusation. She rinsed each one, dried them, and set them back on the cart with labels that now meant nothing at all. The window over the sink framed a square of sky. The blue there looked honest. On her way back, she passed the study with its half-open door. It smelled of leather and old decisions. Papers lay in careful stacks. On the desk, a photo faced the room. A woman laughing at something just outside the frame, hair pinned back, light in her eyes. The glass had a crack thin as a thread through one corner, as if even the picture had felt the tremor of grief. Clara stood a respectful moment, then moved on. The house had been her enemy. It could learn to be her witness. She placed her chair by Isabella's door early that evening, a small sentry against old habits. She left the lamp on low. She held the notebook like a shield. As darkness gathered, she listened for the whisper and realized it had changed timbre. It was still present. Houses don't forget in a single night. But it no longer sounded like a command, more like a story running out of words. She allowed herself a single private thought, not triumph, not certainty, simply this. A child had woken and called for her father, and he had answered. Somewhere far beyond the roof, the world kept turning in its complicated orbit. Inside this room, a simpler law held: breath, presence, patience. When midnight came, the chair did not move. When the corridor sighed, the door did not open. When the house breathed, it learned to do so without reaching for a glass. And for the first time since Clara crossed the threshold, the night laid its hand on the room like a blessing. Tomorrow would carry its own shadows. Cameras to review, loyalties to test, a kitchen where ingredients didn't always behave. But tonight, the whisper had been heard and answered with silence strong enough to hold. Morning did not arrive gently. It came with a sharp light that sliced through the curtains and landed on the edge of the bed like an unwanted truth. Clara woke before it reached her face. The habit of sleeplessness had already grown roots inside her. She rose quietly, adjusted the blanket over Isabella, and listened. The house was pretending to be peaceful again. The walls carried the smell of polish and coffee. Footsteps whispered down the hallway. Yet something beneath that thin surface still pulsed wrong, like a heart skipping a beat it couldn't afford to miss. Downstairs, the staff performed their routines as if they were prayers to a god called order. The butler arranged cutlery in perfect symmetry. The cook's knife tapped rhythmically against wood. The nurse hummed under her breath, a tune too cheerful to be honest. Clara stood at the doorway for a moment before stepping into the kitchen. "Good morning," she said. "Morning," the cook replied without looking up. Her hands never stopped moving, cutting apples with precision too rigid to belong to comfort. Clara approached the counter. "Isabella slept well," she said softly. The cook nodded. "That's good news. Maybe those new supplements help." Clara's stomach tightened. "Which supplements?" The woman gestured with her knife toward a row of small bottles near the sink. Their labels were faded, their caps smeared with residue. "The ones Mr. Lemaire insists on keeping. The doctor sends new ones every week, but those—" She hesitated. "Those are special." Clara picked up one. The liquid inside shimmered faintly. Too viscous for medicine, too clear for syrup. "Do you know what's in them?" The cook's voice lowered. "I don't ask. I keep my job that way." Before Clara could reply, the nurse entered carrying a clipboard. "Breakfast for the child?" she asked briskly. "Porridge and honey," said the cook. The nurse frowned. "No honey. Doctor's orders." "I thought sugar might help her energy," Clara offered. The nurse's tone turned sharp. "We don't experiment here. We follow instructions." Clara forced a calm smile. "Of course. I only want what's best for her." The nurse's gaze lingered longer than politeness allowed. "Then stay out of the kitchen, Mrs. Stevens. The less confusion, the better." She took the tray and left, her shoes clicking like punctuation marks in the marble corridor. When she was gone, the cook sighed. "She's been here longer than most of us. Thinks she owns the air." Clara lowered her voice. "Have there been many nannies before me?" The knife stopped. "5, the cook said quietly. "All gone in less than a month. Why? Reasons. Illness, nerves, Disagreements with the master. One just vanished. Said she was moving to the coast. The woman's eyes lifted briefly, searching Clara's face. Be careful, dear. Some things in this house don't want to be fixed. Clara spent the rest of the morning near Isabella's bedside, pretending to sew while her mind replayed every detail. The bottles, the nurse's tone, the missing nannies. She watched the girl eat slowly, one spoonful at a time, her appetite returning like a timid animal. Do you like the porridge? Clara asked. Isabella nodded faintly. It tastes different. Clara smiled. Different good or different strange? Different safe, the child whispered. The words chilled her. Safe? Isabella looked toward the door. When the other lady fed me, my stomach burned after. But Papa said it was normal. Clara's throat tightened. Which lady? The one with the white dress and the red nails. She says she's the nurse, but she smells like the bottles. Clara stroked her hair. You're very brave, Isabella. Keep telling me everything you feel, okay? The girl nodded, trusting, unaware of the storm those words had just built inside her caretaker's heart. That afternoon the mansion was quieter than usual. Adrian had gone to the city for meetings, leaving the house under the nurse's command. Clara took the opportunity to move carefully through the hallways, memorizing doors, clocks, and the pattern of the floors. She was learning the mansion's rhythm, waiting for the moment it would reveal its weakest heartbeat. In the pantry she found more bottles, some half empty, some sealed. She arranged them on the counter and began reading their labels, whispering the names of chemicals she barely recognized. There was one marked simply Mixture 7, handwritten uneven. She unsealed it carefully and sniffed. Bitterness and metal. A sound behind her made her freeze. The nurse stood in the doorway. What are you doing here? Clara turned slowly. Checking the food, I thought perhaps the milk was spoiling again. The nurse's eyes narrowed. The pantry is off limits. Only staff approved by Mr. Lemaire may handle the medicines. Medicines? These are stored with the food. For convenience. The nurse stepped forward, took the bottle from her hand, and placed it back on the shelf. Some things are delicate, you wouldn't understand. Clara forced a polite nod. Of course. When the nurse left, the door closing too softly to be accidental, Clara exhaled. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the certainty that the truth was closer than ever. Night returned, wearing a different silence. Adrian didn't come home until late. Clara saw him briefly in the hallway, exhausted but sober, the lines on his face deeper yet calmer. She seemed better this morning, he said quietly. She was, Clara replied, and she will be if we keep her routine simple. He looked at her, hesitant. The nurse says you question her methods. I question what hurts the child, Clara said carefully. He studied her for a long moment. Do you think she means harm? I think pain hides better in people who believe they're doing good. Adrian nodded slowly, as if those words echoed something he had once known. I'll speak to her. Clara smiled faintly. Please do, but gently. When he left, she turned back to Isabella's room, her mind already forming a plan. At midnight she moved again. The house was half asleep, the servants long gone to their quarters. She crept into the kitchen, carrying only a candle and her small notebook. The pantry door creaked softly as she opened it. She found the shelf, the bottles, the faint smell of metal and lemon. She placed a few drops of one mixture into a glass of milk and stirred. The liquid clouded instantly, thickening. She poured a second glass, this time with fresh milk only. The difference was unmistakable. The tainted one shimmered slightly, catching light like oil. Her heart pounded. This was no medicine. She heard footsteps. Quickly she hid the glass behind a stack of plates and blew out the candle. The kitchen door opened. Who's there? It was the nurse. Her voice was calm, but beneath it a note of tension trembled. Clara stepped from the shadows. Just me. I couldn't sleep. The nurse's eyes flicked toward the counter. You shouldn't wander. The master dislikes surprises. I'm not one of his surprises, Clara said softly. I'm here for the child. The nurse smiled thinly. And so am I. She crossed the room, poured herself water and drank slowly. Children often make people sentimental, but sentiment doesn't cure illness. Science does. Then why does your science smell like poison? Clara asked. The glass paused halfway to the nurse's lips. For a second the mask slipped, then returned. You should rest, Mrs. Stevez. You look tired. The woman left without another word. Clara waited until the footsteps faded, then retrieved the glass from behind the plates and hid it in her apron. Proof. At dawn, she found Adrian in his office, already awake, the city's light crawling through the tall windows. "Mr. Lemaire," she said quietly, "I need to show you something." He looked up, weary. "It's early. I know, but this can't wait." She placed the glass on his desk. The faint shimmer still danced across the surface. "What is this?" "Milk from the kitchen, the kind your daughter drinks every night." He frowned, lifted it, sniffed. "It smells strange." "It's been tampered with," Clara said. "I found the bottles. The nurse guards them. I believe," she hesitated, "I believe it's making her sick." Adrian's jaw tightened. "That's a serious accusation. I have no proof yet, only this. But please, watch her meals yourself today. Just once." He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "Very well. Leave it to me." When Clara left the office, her knees felt weak, but her heart burned steady. For the first time, she wasn't fighting alone. That night, the mansion did not pretend anymore. It held its breath as if aware that judgment was near. Clara stayed with Isabella until she slept peacefully. Downstairs, she heard voices, Adrian's and the nurse's, sharp, low, urgent. Moments later, footsteps stormed up the stairs. The door opened. Adrian stood there, pale, the bottle in his hand. "You were right," he whispered. "There's sedative mixed in, enough to weaken her heart." Clara covered her mouth. "Dear God." "She said it was for her calmness," he continued, his voice breaking, "but it was killing her slowly." He turned away, his shoulders shaking, the mask of control shattered. Clara approached gently. "Then stop it now. Let her heal. Let this house breathe again." He nodded, whispering, "I will, no more lies." Outside, thunder cracked as if the sky itself had been holding its anger too long. Rain poured against the windows, washing the mansion clean. And for the first time, the wind carried not fear, but relief. Somewhere beyond the storm, dawn was already on its way. The storm had left the world washed and raw. Every leaf outside the mansion dripped with a fragile gleam, and the wet stone path looked like a ribbon of mirror under the pale dawn. Inside, the house had learned a new kind of silence, one that listened instead of hiding. Clara walked through the corridors with measured steps. The air felt lighter, yet she could still sense the residue of fear clinging to the walls, like dust that refused to settle. She passed a window and caught her reflection. Tired eyes, steady resolve. Last night had changed everything. The secret was out, but the truth still had corners left in shadow. Downstairs, Adrian Lemaire sat in the study, his hands clasped around a cup of untouched coffee. The fire in the grate was small, more decoration than warmth. When Clara entered, he didn't look up right away. "She ate breakfast," she said softly, "and kept it down." "That shouldn't sound miraculous," he answered, voice cracked from sleepless hours. "But it does." Clara moved closer. "You did the right thing, sir. Ending the nurse's regimen saved her life." He nodded slowly. "She's gone. I told her not to return." A pause, heavier than the words themselves. "I believed her because it was easier than believing myself." Clara rested her hands against the back of a chair. "Guilt can blind good men, but it can also make them see when they're ready." He met her gaze then, uncertain, grateful, hollowed out, but human again. "Do you think she'll forgive me?" "She already has," Clara said. "Children forgive before they understand why they should." The conversation faded into the rustle of rain dripping from the eaves. For a moment, the mansion seemed to exhale. By afternoon, Isabella's color returned. She sat up for the first time in days, clutching her bear and tracing the seams with her fingers. "Where's the nurse?" she asked. "Gone," Clara said gently. "You don't need her anymore." The child's eyes flickered toward the window. "Did she make me sick?" Clara hesitated. She thought she was helping, but we're helping the right way now. Rest, food, sunshine. Isabella smiled faintly, the first true smile Clara had seen. "Can I go outside soon?" "Soon," Clara promised. "When the garden dries." She opened the curtains wider. Light flooded in, startling in its honesty. The girl blinked, adjusting to it, and then reached out her hand as if trying to catch the sun. From the hallway, Adrian watched in silence. The sight cracked something open inside him. He had not realized until that moment how much hope weighed, how heavy it was to carry and how unbearable it was to lose. But the house was not finished with its secrets. Later that evening, as Clara cleared Isabella's dinner tray, she noticed a folder half hidden beneath a stack of papers on the nightstand. It bore the hospital's crest. Her instinct said look, though her conscience whispered leave it be. She chose the first. Inside were medical reports, old, yellowed at the edges. The dates stretched back years, to before the illness began. Each one listed doses, symptoms, side effects, and at the bottom a familiar signature, Dr. Lucien Moraes. Clara frowned. The same doctor who had visited only once since she arrived, whose visits always ended with quick prescriptions and quicker exits. The one the nurse had called, the only man Mr. Lemaire trusts. She turned another page and froze. A handwritten note, barely legible. Continue with compound mixture under household supervision. Father insists. Recommend gradual withdrawal to avoid suspicion. Her pulse thudded. The nurse had not acted alone. The doctor knew. Maybe he started it. The floor creaked behind her. She turned, hiding the papers under the tray. Adrian stood there, weary but gentle. Clara, you should rest. I was tidying, she said quickly. He smiled faintly. Even angels need sleep. Then he left, unaware of the storm she now carried inside her. That night, Clara sat by the lamp with the folder open on her lap. The firelight flickered over the words that made less and less sense the more she read them. The nurse, the doctor, the mixtures. They had all served a plan that began long before her arrival. She realized the illness had never been random. Isabella had been made weak by design. Controlled, dependent, easily silenced. But why? Her thoughts spiraled. Perhaps the doctor had financial motives. Perhaps someone wanted Adrian indebted, vulnerable. Or perhaps guilt had turned into obsession. The father unknowingly feeding the disease, the doctor enabling it for his own gain. When sleep finally claimed her, it came like drowning. Sudden, heavy, merciful. A scream tore the dawn apart. Clara bolted upright, the lamp still burning low. She ran into Isabella's room. The girl sat upright, eyes wide, pointing toward the door. There was someone here, she cried. Clara held her close. It's all right, sweetheart. You had a bad dream. But the window was open. Rain dripped from the sill. On the floor, a muddy footprint, large and fresh. Clara's heart seized. She rushed to the hallway, calling for the guards, for Adrian. He appeared seconds later, robe thrown over his shoulders, alarm flashing in his eyes. What happened? Someone was in her room, she said. Look. He saw the footprint, his face tightening. We'll check the grounds. 2 guards ran outside into the thinning rain. Minutes later they returned, shaking their heads. No one, sir. Only tire marks near the gate. A car came through during the night. Adrian turned to Clara. The nurse. Clara nodded grimly. She's not finished. By noon the mansion had transformed into a fortress. Locks changed, guards doubled, calls made. Adrian contacted the police, though Clara could see he trusted no one now. She helped calm Isabella, reading to her until the child drifted into an exhausted sleep. Then Adrian entered quietly, holding a letter. This came by courier this morning. His voice shook as he handed it over. The handwriting was elegant, looping, feminine. You think you saved her? But you ruined everything. He made me promise to continue. You don't understand what you're protecting. She was never meant to survive. There was no signature. Only the faint outline of a hospital crest pressed into the paper. Adrian sank into a chair, head in his hands. What does it mean? Who is he? Clara studied the mark. The doctor, she whispered. Lucien Moraes. He's behind all of it. Adrian lifted his head, eyes burning. Then we end this. That evening, Clara helped him gather every record, every prescription, every note bearing the doctor's name. They built a small pile in the fireplace and watched as the flames consumed the lies. The air filled with the acrid scent of ink and paper turning to ash. Isabella slept through it all, her small breaths steady and pure. Adrian looked into the fire and said quietly, I spent years building empires of glass. Now I'd burn them all for this one moment. Clara nodded. The truth has its own price, but it gives back peace. Outside, lightning flashed again, distant this time as if the storm was moving away. The house stood still, wounded but clean. And in the fragile quiet between thunder and dawn, Clara finally believed what she had only whispered before. The miracle wasn't waiting to happen, it had already begun. The days that followed unfolded like the slow unfurling of a wound learning to close. The rain stopped. The trees outside the mansion began to glimmer again under sunlight, and the scent of wet earth replaced the odor of antiseptic that had long haunted the hallways. Yet the peace that arrived was a trembling thing, fragile as glass. Inside, the truth still pulsed beneath every step. Adrian Lemaire had spent 2 sleepless nights sorting through papers, calls, and regrets. His wealth could erase signatures, silence men, move cities, but not time, not what he had allowed to happen. He stood before his daughter's window now, the same one where he had once hidden from dawns he did not want to meet. Isabella sat on the floor near her bear, humming quietly to herself, sunlight brushing the top of her hair like a blessing. "Papa," she said, looking up, "when I'm better, can we go to the park?" Adrian's throat tightened. "Anywhere you want." Clara, folding the girl's clean clothes, caught his glance. There was a weariness in his eyes. Yes, but something softer too. Humility had changed him more than any tragedy could. He stepped toward Clara, voice low. The police questioned the doctor. He admitted the mixture was experimental. He said he was following my old orders from months ago, when I was desperate. Clara set down the shirt in her hands. "He used your guilt as permission." "Yes." Adrian's voice cracked. "I wanted control. I couldn't save her mother, so I thought I could save Isabella. I told him to try anything." He paused. "You were right to stop me before I destroyed her completely." Clara looked at him for a long moment, then said quietly, "You weren't trying to harm her, Mr. Lemaire. You were trying not to lose her. There's a difference." He smiled faintly, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes but still holds gratitude. "You still call me Mr. Lemaire. It reminds us both who we used to be," she replied. He nodded. "Then let's both try to be someone new." By afternoon, the mansion was full of motion again. Repairmen fixing the broken gates, gardeners returning life to the neglected grounds. Yet beneath the bustle there remained a quiet reverence, as if everyone understood the house had witnessed something sacred and terrible. Clara sat on the veranda watching Isabella chase a butterfly across the grass. The child's laughter, thin but real, floated through the open doors like sunlight reborn. Adrian joined her, a cup of tea in his hand. "I don't remember the last time I heard her laugh," he said softly. "You will," Clara said. "It's like learning a language again." He watched her for a moment. "You're leaving soon, aren't you?" She looked out at the garden. "When she's strong enough. I wasn't meant to stay. I owe you more than I can repay." Clara shook her head. "You don't owe me anything. Just keep her safe and keep yourself honest." He smiled, faint and tired. "That might be harder than you think. Then start by trying." Their eyes met. Two people standing on opposite sides of sorrow, connected by the bridge of a miracle neither could explain. That evening, as the sun slipped low and the first lights flickered on, Adrian found himself drawn to the chapel that had long sat unused at the edge of the estate. The small stone building was covered in ivy. The door creaked like it hadn't been touched in years. Inside, the air smelled of wax and rain. Dust motes swam in the shafts of fading light. He knelt awkwardly, unfamiliar with prayer, and said the only words that felt true. "Thank you for sending her." When he looked up, he saw Clara standing at the entrance. She didn't move closer, only nodded, as if she had been expecting him to find this place eventually. "You prayed," she said softly. He nodded. "Or something like it. That's enough." They stood in silence for a moment, the way people do when the same memory hums between them. "She told me once," Adrian said, meaning his late wife, "that miracles are not found. They're recognized." "I never understood that until now." Clara smiled faintly. "Then perhaps she's still teaching you." He closed his eyes. "Maybe so." The following night brought a different kind of storm, the one that lives inside a man learning how to forgive himself. Adrian couldn't sleep. He paced the hall, the floorboards echoing his restlessness. Finally, he stopped outside Isabella's door. The light inside was soft. Clara sat beside the bed reading. The girl slept soundly, one hand curled around her bear's paw. "You're still awake," Clara said without looking up. "I don't know how to stop," he admitted. She closed the book and looked at him. "Then try sitting still. Guilt grows louder when it has space to echo." He took the chair opposite her. For a long moment they said nothing. The only sound was the slow rhythm of the child's breathing. "She looks like her mother," Clara said quietly. "Yes," he whispered. "And that's what terrified me. Every time she smiled, I saw the woman I couldn't save. I wanted to keep her alive so badly I forgot to let her live." Clara reached across the space between them and placed a hand over his. "Then let this moment be the first where you do." He looked down at her hand. Steady, warm, real, and something inside him eased. The silence turned from punishment to peace. The next morning, Isabella woke with more color in her cheeks than anyone had seen in months. She wanted to eat pancakes, she wanted to paint, she wanted to walk outside without a coat. Adrian couldn't stop smiling, even when the doctor, now a new one, kind and careful, warned that recovery would take time. Time, Adrian thought. Finally, it was a word that didn't frighten him. That afternoon he found Clara in the kitchen, helping the cook prepare lunch. The scent of warm bread filled the air. "I've decided something," he said. She looked up, wiping flour from her hands. "Oh? I want you to stay." She blinked. "As Isabella's nanny? As part of the family," he said simply. "This house feels alive again because of you." Clara smiled sadly. "That's kind, but my place isn't here forever. People like me walk into storms and leave when the sky clears. She'll miss you. I'll miss her too." He hesitated, then said, "What about me?" Clara met his gaze and saw the question beneath the words. Not romance, but something deeper. The yearning for forgiveness, for belonging. "You'll be fine," she said softly. "You've already started to become the man she needs." Adrian looked down, smiling despite himself. "You always know the right thing to say." "No," Clara whispered. "I just listen until the truth wants to speak." That night the stars returned, bright, countless, reflected in the glass of the mansion's tall windows. The air smelled clean, the kind of clean that only comes after confession. Clara walked the garden alone, her steps slow, her heart both heavy and light. She looked up at the sky and let the quiet soak into her bones. From the open balcony above, Adrian's voice drifted down. "Clara." She looked up. He leaned on the railing, still in his shirt sleeves, the soft lamplight behind him. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For giving me back my life." Clara smiled. "It wasn't mine to give. God just lent me the courage." They stayed like that for a long moment, two souls joined by something invisible yet undeniable. Above them, the night stretched wide and merciful. Somewhere inside, the house exhaled, its long-held grief finally letting go. And when Clara returned to Isabella's room to check on her one last time, she found the girl fast asleep, her little hand resting over her heart, as if guarding it. The nanny knelt beside the bed and whispered, "Sleep, little one. The worst has passed." Then she looked toward the ceiling, where moonlight pooled softly, and murmured the only prayer she had left to give. "Thank you for the miracle of truth, and for teaching us that love, real love, never hides in the dark." Morning rose slow and golden over the Lemaire estate, as if the sun itself were reluctant to disturb the quiet miracle unfolding within its walls. The air was cool, touched by the scent of fresh grass and roses newly trimmed. For the first time in months, the house did not wake to coughing or footsteps in panic, but to laughter. Soft, bright, alive. Clara stood by the window, holding a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. She didn't drink. She only watched. Outside, Isabella ran through the garden barefoot, the dew glittering around her like tiny stars scattered at her feet. Her laughter carried upward, light and effortless, reaching places where silence had once lived. "Careful, sweetheart," Clara called, smiling despite herself. "I'm not sick anymore." The girl shouted back, spinning, arms wide open to the sky. The sight filled Clara's eyes with tears she hadn't realized she'd been saving. It was as if the child's voice had broken a curse, the same way sunlight breaks through a window left too long in shadow. Behind her, footsteps approached quietly. "She's been up since dawn," Adrian said, voice soft with awe. "I told her to rest, but she said the sun told her it was time to play." Clara turned, her smile gentle. "Then perhaps we should listen to the sun." He chuckled, a sound still foreign to his own ears. The months of tension had carved lines into his face, but now those lines looked less like scars and more like proof of endurance. "It feels strange," he said, "to have peace again." "It's not strange," she replied. "It's grace." He nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on his daughter. "You were right about everything. I thought money could fix pain, control it, bury it. But pain doesn't disappear when you hide it. It only learns how to haunt you." Clara looked down. "We all try to control what we fear, but sometimes healing begins only when we stop fighting." He looked at her, the gratitude in his eyes so unguarded that she had to glance away. "Clara," he began, his voice catching, "how do I thank someone who gave me back my child and my faith?" "You don't," she said simply. "You live it. You love her. That's thanks enough." Later that morning, the three of them had breakfast together on the terrace, something that hadn't happened in over a year. The table was simple: warm bread, honey, fruit, and a jug of milk that Clara herself had poured. The light played across the silverware, soft and forgiving. Isabella sat between them, painting with jam on her toast, giggling when her father pretended to be scandalized by her sticky hands. Clara watched the two of them, her heart swelling with quiet pride. "Papa," Isabella said suddenly, "when Mama was here, did she like the sun too?" Adrian hesitated. The question, so innocent, cracked open the silence between memory and grief. He swallowed. She loved it, he said softly. She said every sunrise meant God hadn't forgotten us. The child nodded, satisfied. Then Mama is watching now, because he remembered. Clara felt her throat tighten. She reached over and brushed a crumb from the girl's cheek. She's proud of you, darling. Of both of you. Adrian looked up at Clara, his eyes glistening. Maybe she sent you here, he whispered. Clara smiled faintly. Or maybe God finally decided to keep his promise. In the days that followed, the mansion bloomed again. Curtains once drawn to hide the world were opened. Fresh flowers replaced the withered ones that had stood as relics of neglect. The servants began to laugh softly among themselves. Even the piano in the east wing, untouched since the funeral, was dusted, its keys cleaned, its silence broken one tentative note at a time. Every morning, Adrian would find Clara in the garden, kneeling by the flower beds with Isabella beside her, both of them covered in dirt and sunshine. And each time he saw them, he felt something deep inside his chest, something he'd buried long ago, stirring back to life. One afternoon, he joined them. Clara looked up, surprised to see him without his phone or his usual coat of composure. "Are you going to help us plant?" she teased. He smiled, kneeling beside them. "I don't even know where to start." Isabella laughed. "Start with the seed, Papa. You have to bury it first." He glanced at Clara, eyes soft. "Seems you two are teaching me everything these days." "Then you're learning fast," she replied. Together, they pressed seeds into the soil, small acts of faith disguised as gardening. Above them, clouds drifted lazily across a blue sky so vast it felt almost merciful. That evening, as the sun began to set, Clara stood alone on the balcony overlooking the city below. The horizon burned in shades of gold and rose, and for the first time, she let herself breathe deeply without fear of what the next hour might bring. She heard footsteps behind her. Adrian stepped out holding a folded envelope. "I found this," he said quietly, handing it to her. "In my wife's Bible. It's addressed to the one who saves my family." Clara frowned, unfolding the yellowed page. The handwriting was delicate, trembling slightly with age. She read aloud, "If someone ever enters this house and brings back the light we lost, tell her I prayed for her long before she arrived, because I knew God would not let my child die in darkness." Clara's hands trembled. "She wrote this before she passed?" He nodded. "Months before. She must have known, somehow." For a long moment they stood in silence, the evening wind whispering around them. Then Adrian said softly, "You were that light." Clara blinked back tears. "No, I was just holding the candle. You're the ones who kept it burning." He reached for her hand, not with possession, but reverence. "If you ever decide to stay," she smiled, interrupting him, "then it won't be as a nanny. It'll be as family." The night fell softly, wrapping the mansion in a serenity it hadn't known in years. In Isabella's room, the little girl slept soundly, the toy bear tucked under her arm, the window open just enough for the moonlight to kiss her hair. Clara checked on her one last time before leaving the room. As she turned off the lamp, she paused at the door. The girl's lips moved faintly, whispering something in her sleep. Clara leaned closer. "Thank you, God," the child murmured, "for giving me my papa back." Tears filled Clara's eyes as she closed the door quietly behind her. Outside, the garden shimmered with the afterglow of the moon. Adrian was waiting near the old fountain, his figure outlined by silver light. She walked toward him slowly, her shoes crunching on the gravel. "She's sleeping peacefully," Clara said. "I know," he replied. "I can feel it. For the first time, the house feels alive when it's quiet." They stood side by side, listening to the soft trickle of the fountain. The air smelled of jasmine and rain, and somewhere far off, an owl called, not mournful, but gentle, as if even the night was at rest. Adrian spoke at last. "I used to think miracles were rare, something God gave only to saints or the desperate, but now I think they happen every day, quietly in people like you." Clara looked at him, her eyes glistening. "Miracles don't start in heaven," she said softly. "They start when we decide to see light in the dark." He smiled. "Then you've taught me how to see." The moonlight spilled over the garden, washing everything in a pale glow. Time seemed to pause, the world holding its breath, allowing them one final moment of peace before life moved forward again. Adrian turned to her, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but whatever it is, I want you here. Not because I need saving anymore, but because I finally understand what it means to live." Clara met his gaze, her heart trembling. "Then tomorrow," she said, "let's live." They stood there, two souls once broken now whole, framed by the whisper of leaves and the song of the wind. And as the first light of dawn began to climb the horizon, the mansion's windows caught the sun and threw it back into the sky. For the first time in years, the Lemaire house was filled not with shadows but with the quiet, eternal glow of a miracle born of truth, love, and grace. The end.